We're going to start talking about the body's ability to defend itself against infection. And so we're going to be looking at the immune system. And there are different parts of our immune system. We're going to be focusing first on, first we're going to be talking about innate immune system, immunity, excuse me. Um, Looking at species resistance, of course, because our cells and our physiological processes of humans are different than those things that may be infecting us, we are then therefore incompatible with a lot of the things that the pathogen is trying to do. We don't have the correct chemical receptors on our human cells, so uh, we just don't become infected by them, or conditions may be that they're just incompatible for the pathogen to survive. So we may be too warm for certain pathogens or too cold for others. Maybe too acidic or not acidic enough. Whatever that condition might be inside our bodies, it just makes us incompatible. Now, that doesn't mean that we have innate resistance to everything. There's a lot of things that we don't, and that we are fairly compatible with, when those are the ones that make us the most sick. So now we're looking at the body's first line of defense. And these are just talking about our structures, various chemicals and processes that work in our bodies to prevent pathogens from entering, such as our skin. Our skin is a barrier to things penetrating inside. Our mucous membranes affect and hold on to invaders so that they're not able to get into some of the orifices or holes into our body that things can make us sick through. Okay, and so we see these in the respiratory system, the digestive system, the urinary system, and our reproductive system. So looking first at skin, it's made up of the epidermis and multiple layers of tightly packed cells. So few pathogens can actually penetrate these layers of cells. And a lot of times in the process of shedding dead skin cells, we actually remove microorganisms from our bodies. So it provides a basic physical barrier to many microbes. And certain epidermal dendritic cells will actually phagocytize pathogens, which means they're basically going to eat, break down, destroy pathogens that they come into contact with. So you can see the scanning electron micrograph of the surface of human skin, and so we've got these layers of cells that eventually flake off as we build new ones underneath. Skin also has certain chemicals that help to defend against pathogens. So we perspire through our sweat glands. Salt, of course, we know can affect growth of pathogens. And there are also antimicrobial peptides that will actually defend against our invasion of microorganisms. These are called defensins or dermcidins. Dermcidins are various basically broad spectrum antimicrobials that we produce that work against gram-positive or gram-negative bacteria as well as certain fungi. We also produce lysozyme, which as we talked about before, which is an enzyme that's able to destroy the cell walls of some bacteria. And it's an enzyme that works this way. We also have something called sebum, which is secreted by our sebaceous oil glands, and it helps to keep our skin pliable so it's less likely to break or tear, which causes a hole through our membrane, skin. Of course, if you have a hole, then you have access for things to become opportunistic pathogens, but we want to prevent that, so we try to keep our skin pliable. I do want to say one thing you want to be careful about is overwashing your skin. You may have washed your hands a lot in winter and they start to crack, and so sometimes you can wash so much that you wash away the oil because you're using soap, and of course soap is going to break down oil, and so this may crack your skin, may even to the point of bleeding for some people if they're not careful. So when your skin becomes less pliable, it cracks and you have the chance for infection. So sebum helps to keep our skin pliable in this way. It also helps to lower our skin pH. That will help to inhibit many of the bacteria that can grow. We also have mucous membranes that line all of our body cavities open to the environment, helping to prevent any infection coming into those holes in our skin. There's two distinctive layers. These the epithelium, which is a thin outer covering of the mucous membranes, where mucus is sticky to kind of trap and bacteria and other pathogens to keep them from going any further in. There's also the epithelial cells that are living cells that are there as a barrier, and they're tightly packed to help prevent against many of our pathogens, and they continually shed just like the other, we see our epidermal cells. We see the shedding to prevent pathogens from staying there, and we end up shedding them. Dendritic cells are found here below the epithelium to help phagocytize, eat, break down pathogens. There's also the goblet, and which produces the mucus, and the ciliated columnar propels mucus. And these different kinds of cells help to also remove invaders from those areas. And so we also have a deeper connective layer that will support the epithelium in this method of prevention from things infecting us. And so, of course, they will also get some chemicals that are produced there to defend against pathogens. You can see some of these passageways into our respiratory system, our nasal cavity, the pharynx, after the nasal cavity, our tongue and epiglottis are first rounds of defense. And of course, when you get sick a lot of times, you build up this mucus in the back of the throat and also in the nose. These are defense mechanisms. You might wonder why when you're outside and you smell or you get pollen in your respiratory tract and you start to produce mucus, it's because the body is trying to prevent those things which seem like invaders from getting any further into the body. And so we see this first line of defense where you can compare skin versus our mucous membranes. Number of cells, are they tightly packed, dead or alive, mucus present, relative water content, our defensins, lysozyme, sebum, cilia present, constant shedding of cells. And here I'd like you to know this comparison, because a lot of these things will make sense if you will pay attention. Why is the skin dry? Well, the skin is dry to prevent water, which of course water is necessary for growth of these organisms. Why is the mucus moist? Well, because of that mucous membrane will actually help to trap this pathogen. So I want you to think about the comparison here. You also have the first line of defense with the lacrimal apparatus. This is associated with your eyes. This is where you produce and drain tears, and blinking spreads these tears around and washes the surface of the eye, which also spreads lysozyme in our tears, which will help to destroy bacteria through the lysing effect that it has. So, of course, one of our ways of entering our body is through the eyes. That's kind of funny when you think about, that one way to look into a person's soul is through their eyes. Also, one of the ways into our body is through our eyes. And so you see the lacrimal apparatus, and this is also like when you start to cry. You notice that not only do you have tears coming out of your eyes, but they also come out your nose. So if you've ever wondered why you start to sneeze, not sneeze, but your nose starts to run when you're crying, it's because of this lacrimal canal. As it's sweeping from the glands above your eye and then behind the eye, and it sweeps across the eye to protect the eye, it also has a way to get out, which is through the lacrimal canal, which leads to the nasolacrimal duct in the sinus. And of course, that's going to come out the nose or down the throat, of course, which is going to take a lot of this stuff to the stomach if it does get down the throat into a very acidic environment. So both of these ways, it gets it out of places where it's going to become an infection. You also have a microbial antagonism as part of your first line of defense, where you have a very normal microbiota that's normally on your skin or in these various orifices, and also internally in the body. And so you have normal microbiota competing with these potential pathogens. Of course, you think of it this way: if you have a very, very full room, you can't put more people in that room. And the more bacteria that we've got growing on us that are non-harmful, the less harmful bacteria have a place to be and to get nutrients, to have a space. There's basically a no vacancy sign for your body in a lot of those places. So the normal microbiota just make it harder for pathogens to compete because they can consume the nutrients, and of course they're there first. They consume it because they more readily have it available. They create an environment that's just unfavorable to other microorganisms. They can even, in their own way, help to stimulate the body's second line of defense. And overall, they help to promote overall health also by providing vitamins to us as the host. And we see that with E. coli in our um, colon. So it's kind of an interesting connection. So we see the digestive system here in the urinary system, where you see various secretions that are produced as part of our first line of defense: saliva, stomach acid, gastroferritin, bile, intestinal secretions. Peristalsis is a movement, an activity. Defecation, again, an activity of eliminating microorganisms. They don't get to stay in one place. Vomiting is a part of this. We see this with urine. Of course, vaginal secretions, menstrual flow, prostate secretion. The cardiovascular system we see with our blood flow, coagulation, transferrin. Um, and you see the functions here, which I'm not going to go through, but you can read in your notes.